up, fam? We are back on another episode of the CEO Pulse podcast where you get the real, the raw, and the mind of entrepreneurship. We are sitting down with none other than Brian Miller. He's a human connection specialist. He's got a very dynamic background. I mean, all the way from magic to coaching people get ready for TEDx talks. He has an amazing TEDx talk out there with millions of views, which I want to talk and pull some threads on that. But I'm very excited to have you in here, man. This topic is it's incredibly important because the human factor, human capital is one of the biggest things, right? And when it comes to just creating good organizational flow, having systems work and all that stuff it's important, but having that emotional side of things really kick in and tapping into that space, understanding, far beyond that level of empathy, and really making a connection, it's oftentimes easier said than done. So I can't wait to break into this conversation. Thank you so much for being on the show, Brian.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, my pleasure. So magic, I mean, well, give us a little bit of context on your background, how you got started, and I mean, because I was watching your TED talk and it's incredible, right? To go from a space where you're being a perspective changer for people out on the road. I mean, you're talking restaurants, you're talking, face-to-face contact. How do you go from that to actually coming in and then coaching and building, the stuff that you have done so far?
Purely by accident, the universe decided that's the path that was laid out for me. The truth is, I spent 10 years as a full-time professional magician, and I've been doing magic all my life, since I was a little kid. And I got into magic the same way every little kid does. Somebody gives them a magic kit, and in my case, it was my dad, my grandfather. They both just loved magic. They were magic enthusiasts. So I was kind of around it all my life, and no one ever imagined I would end up becoming a professional magician. They probably would not have introduced me to magic if they had known that's what was in store for me. My whole family are academics, PhDs, doctors. I was kind of groomed for that all my life, and I went to college for philosophy, studying philosophy of language. I was all set to go and do a PhD and be a professor and go into the ivory tower and follow the family tradition. And at the very last second, I turned down a PhD offer because I wanted to do card tricks for a living, which was a rough phone call home.
Yeah.
It was not terribly well received, but I decided to try to go do this thing that was magic that I loved. And it seemed like if it didn't work out, I could always go back to school. School is kind of always there. You can go back if you want to. And it was hard, a couple of years of really, I did the quote unquote starving artist life. I was never really starving, obviously, but I was eating nothing but rice and beans for a while there and, trying to make it. And I was doing magic in people's backyard barbecue pool parties and at local restaurants and stuff. And eventually I got a few lucky breaks, and I managed to build a career as a magician where I was touring nationally and eventually internationally, and got about as successful as you can be as a magician without being famous, is kind of how I used to phrase it. But I was burning out, and this is a really common story, and I think it's too common of a story. There's too many people that have decided to pursue their passion and ended up burning out, because what happened to me was what happens to so many people when you make your passion your living, is you end up spending so much time on the getting money aspect, like I need to feed myself, where magic suddenly was no longer something I got to do. It was something I had to do. My life depended on it, right?
Yeah.
And it changes your relationship with your art. And so for a couple of the last few years I was a full-time magician, I was just burned out. I was on the road 250, 300 days a year. It was rough on my relationship with my then girlfriend, eventually fiance, and eventually wife. It did end up working out. But
Nice.
I was struggling. Yeah, and then I got invited to give that TEDx talk that you alluded to, and I didn't expect it to go viral. You can't make anything go viral, but I gave the best talk I could. And, I was hoping for 10,000 views. I thought that would be incredible. It got 3.5 million views. At one point, it was one of the top 100 TED or TEDx talks ever given. Like, it was impossibly successful. And it just yanked me into a career as a speaker and a writer where people wanted to pay me to hear my thoughts about what I had learned as a magician rather than hire me to do a magic show. And man, I got to tell you, it was like I was going, 200 miles an hour on a freeway towards a brick wall, and out of nowhere, just an exit ramp just opened up, and I just took it. That's it.
So did you end up doing a total shift from I mean, setting up, magic and following that path into what you're doing now, or is it something that you kind of still, we can, the reason, I guess I'm rambling too much, but the reason I'm asking is because we can make a passion become a headache after a while, right? And just like you said, it'll become tasky, it loses its art or value or emotional connection to what we have going on, and it's easy to kind of have things fall by the wayside sometimes. Did you end up reconnecting with it, or is it something that you just, turned the chapter and then moved on?
That's a really good question. I love magic again all these years later, having, I started leaving it in 2015 when the TEDx went viral, and it took a few years. I didn't like immediately go 100% I'm a speaker now. It doesn't work like that. I still, even with the best credential you could have, famous TED Talk kind of a thing, it still took years to build a full-time career as a quote-unquote thought leader, a speaker, writer, consultant, that kind of thing. And so I was kind of halfway out of magic and halfway into speaking for a couple of years while I made the transition. But once I really made that transition and I really didn't need magic anymore, the key was I now got to go back to I get to do magic. I don't have to do magic anymore. And so I started saying yes very selectively to the I only said yes to a magic show when it was the right client, the right event, the right conditions, when I got to set the rules for my engagement, for my art. And if they weren't into it, then it didn't matter. They said no, or I said no, and I didn't need it. I didn't need magic anymore. And so I started doing, 8 to 15 magic shows a year instead of 250 to 300 magic shows a year.
Wow.
And I think the year right before the pandemic started, I was basically completely out. I had done 3 or 4 magic shows, and that was it. I've done more since the pandemic started, interestingly, because so many of my former clients needed entertainment virtually, and they knew that I knew the tech and I knew magic, and that I could do. So I've actually done a lot of magic since the virtual world started. And I'm having a blast because, again, I get to set the rules. It's my studio. It's my rules.
Pretty sick studio, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. As entrepreneurs, I think inspiration comes in it's not really a skill, right? It's a borrowed gift, and we can pursue that through art. I'm looking at your guitar back there. We're talking about guitar right before it. I have the same thing on my, so I mean, that's why I can relate. There's things that disconnect you and take you to a different space. They just put you in a better mood and then just rewire your energy altogether, right? And I mean, for you, obviously, your magic was one of those. Now, taking it to that next level, it could be something that becomes a burden. It's incredible to see how it can become a burden as opposed to that fuel that wakes you up and wants to give you that need to crush the day and then do the entrepreneur thing. So you shifted into becoming a thought. You said something very important too, which I want to touch on the TED Talk. You made a comment about when you know the secret, your perspective is limited, and that really landed. That resonated a lot. I can absolutely relate because I've been and of course I don't do magic. All I can make disappear is like a sandwich or something. But it's as business owners or as entrepreneurs, when we know the system, when we know the process, or we have the view behind the curtain, our perspective is limited. And meaning that if we don't have that awareness to come back and shift and put ourselves in the other person's shoes, and see it from their vantage point, we can get caught up in this little box, right? That's limited. That's the whole world. It becomes the thing. That's it. But how do you get beyond that? you were talking about perspective on that talk, and I'm gonna do the link on the show notes for that TED talk, because I think it's, I mean, it was a really really amazing talk. But how do you go
Thank
beyond
you.
that?
Yeah, so this is I'm so glad you honed in on that, because that was the crux of the TEDx talk and is the crux of my entire career in human connection and everything that I do now. And it's all built on something I learned as a magician, of all the silly places, you know. You would never expect where you learn the most important tools for your next project or your next career. And I think that so often the most important tools come from outside of our own industry. You know,
Yeah.
I bet you bring in so much insight into what you do as an organizational psychologist from your interest in guitar and music that you may not even realize yet. But I bet if you think really hard about it, so much of it comes from somewhere else. And that's really where innovation happens, right? Is when you get out of your own perspective and you bring in outside influences and you have ideas that collide with each other that somebody who's just completely focused on one thing could never put together, because they don't have the outside influences to bring in. And this is the fundamental problem of connecting with somebody, whether it's personally or professionally, whether it's selling a product or service or an idea, whether you're trying to get your kid to eat their broccoli. When we're trying to connect with somebody else, we tend to just assume that everyone thinks like we do, that
Hmm.
they have the same kinds of thoughts, wants, needs, beliefs, concerns, worries that we do. And so we talk to them the way we would want someone to talk to us. It's kind of the golden rule. The golden rule is wrong. Golden rule is wrong. You shouldn't treat people the way you want to be treated. You should treat people the way they want
They
to be
want to be
treated.
treated.
Right? And this is kind of, you know, this is not a new concept anymore, but the critical lesson from magic is this. I cannot fool another magician because she knows the same stuff I know. I can't create magic for another magician, right? She knows all the same secrets I do. It's only because you, a non-magician, have a different perspective, a different way of looking at the world. It's because of that that I can do magic. Not in spite of your different perspective, but because of it that I can create magic. And this is what we need to bring into our relationships, whether they're personal or professional. The recognition that other people have internal lives that are very different from our own. And the way to do it, because you're asking, like, so that's the mindset, but what's the practice? How do you do it? You ask, right? We ask people for their perspective, ask people for their
Yeah.
point of view. Again, there's this tendency to go, okay, I recognize other people have a different perspective, so I'm going to try to imagine what that perspective is. This is the advice you get a lot, right? Try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's a really good creative exercise, but it is ultimately flawed. And it's ultimately flawed because your imagination is still bound by your perspective, right? You can only imagine within the perspective you already have. So stop trying to guess what other people are thinking, what they want, what they believe, and just ask them. People are shocked when they start doing this after I tell them, to find out that other people have completely different wants, beliefs, needs, desires than they do. And that's where we start.
I love it. Just ask. Just ask. As
Yeah,
simple as that sounds. Yeah.
it's simple, but it's not easy. Right? It feels awkward. It feels uncomfortable. We get nervous. We think, I'm going to be bothering this person. I'm going to be a nuisance. They're not going to know why the hell I'm asking them to explain something that to them is obvious, because it's how they think, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, people are so much more willing to answer our questions than we give them credit for. You know, I use the example a lot. Have you ever had somebody ask you for your opinion on a movie or a TV show or some product they're thinking about buying, or a guitar? Yeah, don't you get excited when someone asks for your opinion? Because it's like this subconscious realization that they value who you are inside, right? That they value your internal experience of the world. Well, we feel like that when someone else asks for our opinion, but when it comes to us asking other people, we go, I don't want to bother them. Wait, no, right? Think about how it affects you. Reach out to other people.
I love that, man. You mentioned assuming. That topic has come up a couple of times actually. I just interviewed Dr. Diane Hamilton, and she specializes in curiosity. she specializes in curiosity and how that kind of leaves us after a while. We get educated out of curiosity, but she has four principles, or the four things that can hinder the process of curiosity, right? And the first one is fear. The second one is assuming, it's assumption. So I thought it was very interesting that you're tying it as well to the concept of human connection, because it makes perfect sense. And it's assuming what that other person is thinking. There's classical conditioning. There's perspectives, like so mentioned in your TED talk, that we don't understand. We're not there. We don't know what they're going through, and it's a lot easier to step back from it, really, and just have a simple, transparent, and open conversation, as opposed to trying to figure out this whole world based on thesis and and educated guesses that we have in our heads. So
Yeah, and this is a critical point too. Remember, the point is not agreement. The point is understanding. Right? The goal of human connection is not agreement, it's understanding. You're not going to agree with everybody. Life would be horribly boring if you agreed with everybody. And, I think it would be better if more people agreed right now than we do. I think we've got a lot of divisiveness, obviously, in the world over the last couple of years, and it seems to be getting worse. I wish we agreed more, but what's more important to me than all of us on different sides of all these crazy issues right now agreeing is actually shutting the hell up and listening to what the other side is saying. Yeah. And I'm just as guilty of this, in my personal life. I make this mistake too. I'm not some superhuman at this stuff. It's in some ways, it's like my friend Peter Gazzardi, the legendary book editor, likes to say. He says, the preacher always gives the sermon they themselves need to hear. I've made a career out of human connection. I've made a career out of human connection because I was so bad at it for so long, right? And for me, it's so useful to be the one saying the stuff out loud every day, reminds me every day of the stuff that I need to do. But I think that the world would be in a much better place right now if we were simply stopped screaming past each other and we at least tried to understand why the other side, quote unquote, the other side thinks the way they do. Because the truth is, and this is to borrow something that my mentor and hero Seth Godin talks about, if you wanted what they wanted and you believed what they believed and you knew what they knew, you would be doing the same thing they are. But you don't. They believe something different, they want something different, or they know something different than you. And because of that, they're aiming for something different. I mean, the truth is, take a really controversial topic, in the last couple of years, like vaccines. The people who are for, and I don't care which side of the aisle you're on is for this conversation, the people who are for vaccines because they believe in, they what they care about is the safety and security of their family and their future. And the people who are against vaccines are against them because they care about the safety and security of their family and their future.
Yeah, it's just coming from
two different spaces. We both want the same thing, right? But we believe different things, so we're making different conclusions. And at least if we understand that the person on the other side of this contentious argument, is also trying to protect their family, at least then we can talk with each other instead of talking at each other. And that would be a start.
Yeah, it's listening or having conversations intentionally, right? Not just for the sake of having conversation, actually paying attention, not being biased as to, okay, this is our point. And I've been there plenty of times before, especially with, like, for example, employees and running businesses and stuff like that. A lot of times at the beginning, you know what, I know best. I have all the answers. I do this, I do that. And if it's not created and crafted by me, it's probably silly. And it's totally wrong. There's a lot of people who are way better at things, working in the company. And they're way better at doing stuff, certain stuff than I am, and opening up to those points of view, those perspectives. It's important, and you have to listen intentionally. You have to sit down and ask questions and really, tap into their human self. And you're talking about something real interesting too. The whole concept of human connection. You said you bring it up and you specialize in it because it was something that really just call to you at a personal level. It's funny, but I do a lot of content on a regular basis, and the topics just keep coming. I'll be in the middle of a meditation, and then a topic just pops up, and then I'll go to town and then create a video after that. But it's stuff that's applicable, right? It's relevant because I'm in that space. I'm needed. It's a question that kind of came to me. Now we're putting it out there. It's kind of like a tangent, but I thought it was just interesting how you brought that up. Um,
Mm.
how and now you help people get ready through or to uh, do presentations, for example, TEDx talks, and I mean that requires not just being able to create a connection and confidence and comfort with that client or that person, but building them up as well, right? So tell me about that.
Yeah, so this evolved again naturally. Most of the projects and the careers that I've had have really been just the universe like throwing you in a direction enough times for you to finally notice that you're getting thrown in that
Yeah.
direction. And back in 2017, about 2 years after my own TEDx talk, is I think the first time somebody reached out to me cold, just reached out, said, I saw your TEDx talk. I loved it. I'm giving a TEDx talk in a couple of months. Is there any way you could help me? I know you speak for a living. I don't know if you coach anybody. And I didn't coach anybody, but I did what all great entrepreneurs do. I pretended like I did. Right? This is what entrepreneurs do. When a great idea, somebody asks you to do something that sounds really interesting. And so, most entrepreneurs sell first, build later, right?
Yeah, say
And
yes
so
and figure it out. Yeah.
say yes and then figure it out, right? And then be responsible. If it really isn't something that you're good at or you would be good at, say no, refer them off. But like this was something I thought I can, I'm a teacher at heart. I can coach somebody on a TEDx. I had just never done it before.
Yeah.
So I worked with her for 2 months, got her ready. This was one she had already been invited to, so I wasn't getting her into one. I was just helping her write the script and rehearse it. And it was a massive success. I mean, it just,
Wow.
it did terrific. And she was just thrilled, and she started giving my name to everybody. And so more people came in from that. And over a couple of years, it turned into not just a side hustle, but a real business. But I couldn't give any real attention to that business because I was too busy as a speaker on the road, flying country to country, 5 continents a year, speaking, keynoting. And then the pandemic hit. And in 2020, when I got grounded at home and there were no speaking events, I had all this time to step on the gas of this coaching business and take it from something that was like 5% of my work just because I didn't have the time to something that's 50, 60, 70% of my work. Now, it's a huge amount of my work now. I think I do more coaching than speaking, and I'm still speaking a lot.
Yeah.
So it's just like another new business. And so what I really enjoy about taking people through the TEDx process, and I mostly work with people who want to get a TEDx talk and then deliver it, or who've been already invited to a TEDx conference and then want to work with me to nail it. But I do work with leaders, business owners, even if they're not going to do TEDx, I work with them on their content creation, how to build a thought leadership platform, how to start speaking. All of that kind of work is about one word: clarity. It's all about clarity. What is the least amount of things you need to say to get your idea to spread, right? And so the way I always describe it to people is this. The reason TED is such a great example is because TED is all about the idea worth spreading. That's their tagline: ideas worth spreading. What is the idea worth spreading? Well, every single TEDx application, if you want to apply to a conference, the very first question says, state your idea worth spreading in one sentence. That is the first question on a TEDx application. And it is the question where 99% of all applications go right in the garbage.
Wow.
Almost every TEDx application gets thrown out on the first question. In fact, TEDx conferences, on average, only accept 1% of all applicants. Harvard accepts 5% of all applicants. Okay? TEDx accepts 1% of all applicants on average. Many conferences even less than that because they only do invite and they don't even put out an open application. They do 0 applications. So what do you need to do to even get past that first barrier? You need to be able to explain what your idea is, who it's for, and why it matters in one sentence. And this is very difficult. This
Yeah,
is
that
very
level of
difficult.
clarity is intense. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. And so what I do is I work with TED and TEDx speakers and leaders to develop that level of clarity. And then once we've got that as our North Star, then all of the other decisions about their speech get easier. Should I use this joke, or, should I use a joke? Should it be serious? Should I use this story or that story? How am I going to structure this talk? Slides or no slides? All these options, the option paralysis that happens to people where they don't even know where to start. All of that goes away when you can state in one sentence what your talk is about, who it's for, and why it matters. Because now you get to run every decision you make through the lens of that North Star. You say, okay, should I tell this story or that story? You go, well, let's look at this story. Does this story immediately and obviously support my idea worth spreading? No? Then it doesn't belong in an 8-minute talk. I got no room for it. It's gone, right? This is how you make those decisions. And after the TEDx coaching business took off, I started getting requests to do a lot of the work I do now, which is taking the same clarity training into organizations, into sales teams, into marketing teams, and helping them get TED level clarity on their messaging at an organizational level. So it's really just the work has kind of just expanded in a very natural progression over the last few years. It's really exciting. I don't know if you can tell, but it's a lot of fun because I get to combine the clarity communication that I loved from when I was a philosophy student. That's what philosophy is about.
Full circle,
all those years ago, full circle,
yeah.
with the human connection that's all come in this other career. Because how do you connect with people best? Make sure that they actually know what the hell you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of I mean, a lot of the stuff that I do as an organizational psychologist really, revolves around that kind of stuff. It's about clarity, and I think you make a very important point, right? You were kind of going over a framework right there, as far as this is the first thing that you focus on. If that's solid, everything else can go through it, and it can act as a filter. You take that, and then you take it into, I mean, personal vision. You take it into a company, take it into, I don't know, the way that what are your values, and what's the big idea of in your family, but you take that context, right, and you can apply it and break it down into different spaces of your life and really create that level of clarity. A lot of times what I see, especially with a ton of students, and when it comes to analysis paralysis and the what's stopping them from taking action, really jumping into that next level, or creating some of that fear, it's really not the skill set, it's not the training, it's not any of that stuff. It's just the level of clarity is not there.
It's that they don't know what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
they don't actually know where they're headed, right?
Exactly.
And this is something I talk about a lot, which is so many people, especially because of the hashtag hustle culture, and everybody wants to be Gary V. And listen, I love Gary, like, whatever. But the problem with that, the problem with that mindset is everyone's trying to move faster. But moving faster is only useful if you know where you're going. Running 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction is a really bad idea, right? So slow down, stop getting so worried about moving fast, and figure out where you're actually going. Who do you really serve? What problem do you actually solve? Do these people know that they have the problem that you want them to have? Because this is a big problem for entrepreneurs. They're trying to solve a problem that their customers don't think they have.
Yeah.
This is a big problem.
Again, clarity in that mission, right? It may be passion, it may be something that we need. It's highly needed or required in whatever industry, whatever space you're in. But at the end of the day, like, the masses, the consumption is really what's going to create that product, right? And it can be crafted through an idea of purpose, but if it doesn't sell, if it doesn't move, if it's not solving a problem, better said, if it's not solving a real problem for people out there, it's not going to go anywhere, right? And that's going to frizzle away. In your case, even, for example, talking about magic, as a you were solving a problem there for people. They were bored out of their minds, especially during the pandemic, and then just your Zoom business started taking off. So that's
bingo.
That's very interesting.
And a lot of Yeah, and to just close that loop there, a lot of I do now that I'm not in the magic world as much anymore, I get to kind of play around with helping out younger magicians and kind of just in my free, because I enjoy helping magicians, like, because that was like my community for so long, and kind of once a magician always a magician, and a lot of magicians really misunderstand what they're selling. Most magicians think they're selling a magic show. And you're screwed if you think you're selling a magic show. Because you know what? Nobody needs a magic show. Nobody needs a magic show. What do they need? Well, it depends on who it is. What if you're a birthday party magician, what does a mom of a 5-year-old need? Well, a mom of a 5-year-old needs professional babysitting for 30 minutes. You know, they need babysitting for 30 minutes in a way that doesn't really cause a mess. Or if depends on what type of mom. If you're talking to a mom in Greenwich, Connecticut, a really wealthy 1% mom, well, what that mom needs is to look like a professional party planner without actually doing any work. That's what you're really selling, right? If you can do that for them, then you're in phenomenal shape. As a corporate magician, they don't actually need a magic show. What do they need? Well, the CEO who hires you, what she needs is, she needs to make all of her team feel like they're appreciated for the hard work that they've done this year. That's what she really needs. But what if it's the executive assistant who's hiring you? Well, the executive assistant doesn't really care about the team, quote unquote. I mean, she does, but like, she doesn't care about the team. What the executive assistant cares about is making her boss look like a rock star so that they look like a rock star, right? What you're actually selling is not a magic show. And so, yeah, this goes into so many. If you can think through it as a magician, you can think through it in almost any business.
I love it, man. I love it. That shift in perspective again, popping up. So how do you connect with yourself? Because we are talking, I mean, one of the biggest points of conversation here is the human connection. But how do you connect with yourself to create that higher level of clarity, for example, in your vision, in your path?
Yeah, this is a really good question. There's a whole chapter in my book called Know Thyself, and it's for this exact reason, which is you really can't meaningfully connect with another person if you don't know who you are. Because the way that we connect with others is over values and beliefs and, the things that we want and the things that we care about and the things that we would be willing to sacrifice for. And if you don't know what those things are, you're not going to make a real connection with another human being. It's always going to be superficial. And, nobody teaches us how to do this. Like you're asking about this and you think, you have to be an adult who signs up for a self-help program to learn how to do this. Kids aren't taught how to connect with themselves, how to truly know who they are. It's not built into the educational system in America anyway. It might be in some Eastern parts of the world, but it's definitely not in Western culture, right?
Yeah.
Get your grades, get your resume, do the extracurriculars, get to the next. Go
through the conveyor belt, yeah.
Yeah, go through the machine, exactly. And, be a cog like everybody else. And so the way that you connect with yourself, I just did this actually with one of my current one-on-one kind of VIP coaching clients, somebody who's not working on a TEDx like we talked about, but she is building a thought leadership platform. She sold her successful business that she ran for years and years and kind of has money to play with for a year and is trying to wonder what should I, let me try something that feels really me and not just owner of a business. So she's kind of building a YouTube channel and playing around with content and things like that, the fun stuff. And I said, she had these 3 different things she wanted to do. She wanted to do like long form podcast interviews like we're doing and like I do. She wanted to do short form comedy skits like 30 seconds, 60 seconds on like TikTok or Reels or whatever. And she also wanted to do, I don't know what it was, some other type of, there's like 3 different types of content. Like a vlog style web series about her hometown. Okay, 3 totally different types of content. She asked me in a session, how do I do all these 3 totally different things while staying consistent as a personal brand? This is a really smart question, right? Yeah. Smart client, smart question.
I struggled with that.
So,
I completely get it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
So the first thing is one of my mentors, Tim David. He talks. I like to give all credit where credit's due. So pardon me for dropping a bunch of names, but my mentor,
good.
Tim David, what he mentioned once to me was so smart. He said, people misunderstand authenticity. People think authenticity is about, being the same person to everybody. But that's not authentic, because you would never treat, and this is my take on this, you would never treat your grandmother the way you treat your boss. Treating your boss the way your boss should be treated, and treating your grandmother the way your grandmother should be treated, is being authentic to each relationship. That's authenticity. Fulfilling the expectation and responsibility of that particular relationship. That's authentic. And so for me, what a personal brand, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so what a personal brand actually is the expectations you create, right? And the responsibility that you accept, and just delivering on those expectations. And so, to answer my client's question and to answer your question, how do I be consistent across all these different things? What we did is like a full 1 hour deep dive where we broke down who she is as a fully three-dimensional human being, the real actual person behind the personal brand. And we had, 5 different categories and all these different traits and values and beliefs and wants and desires and needs. We got all this huge amount of really intense, really emotional work done. And then we said, okay, I said, we're going to choose 3 of those attributes: values, wants, beliefs, attitudes, whatever they are. We're going to choose 3 of them. And those 3 are going to be the 3 things that we highlight. And we have to hit those 3 things everywhere that we show up, whether it's a short form comedy sketch, whether it's a long form YouTube video, whether it's a web series, whether it's a blog post or an Instagram video, whatever it is. Those 3 things are going to be the things that, even though you're doing totally different types of content, everyone will recognize you, the personal brand, by the consistency of those 2 to 3 things. And like, this is, if you're into Gary Vee, right? We talked about him earlier. Gary Vee does a ton of different types of content, lots of different businesses, but he is recognizable. It's the same guy, the same personal brand, whether it's a long form interview or a short form thing or a post or a text post or a tweet or whatever it is, because he stands for the same thing no matter what the venue he's in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that clarity and consistency across, right? I mean, that
yeah.
I think it ties back into what's the idea worth spreading. I mean, we as individuals create an idea of what we want, right? For example, mine is to empower entrepreneurship. That's everything I do in the I have 4 different businesses, and everything I do in those businesses connects to empowering entrepreneurship. Everything from, empowering the team, the staff to, create their own paths and visions and stuff like that, to coaching and just creating entrepreneurs in general, right? But it's that one message that gets plugged into each one of my businesses. And with
exactly.
that, yeah, with that, I follow with a simple, I have 3 core principles that I carry with me across the businesses, and it just connects everything. But to get to that level of simplicity, I mean, brother, it took years. It took it took years to figure out what I wanted to be, what I wanted to be when I grew up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we evolve, and we have this idea in our heads, and you're organizational psychologist, this, we have this idea in our heads that we're always done. It's called the end of history illusion, that we're always done growing. And they've done these studies, and the studies are amazing, right? So I'm sure this super famous study in psychology where they ask people, do you feel like you're the same person as you were 10 years ago? And they say, no, I'm a totally different person I was 10 years ago. Do you feel like 10 years from now you will be a totally different person? Say, no, I feel like I've pretty much found out who I am now. Okay, they followed up with those exact people 10 years later, and they asked them, do you feel like you're the same person now as you were 10 years ago? And they all said, no, I'm a totally different person than I was. I'm in a different stage of life. Do you feel like you'll be a different person 10 years from now? They all said, nope, I feel like I've pretty much stopped. And they followed up 10 years later and did it again. At every stage of life, people feel like, I'm done growing, I'm done evolving, this is who I am. But we're always in flux. And so if you can find those 2 or 3 core values and carry them through those changes in your environment and your life with you, That, I think, is the ticket to consistency. Because when I was a magician, I cared about connecting with people. As a speaker, I care about connecting with people. As a coach and a consultant, I care about connecting with people. Totally different businesses, always the same goal. Everyone deserves to feel heard, understood, and valued. That's what Brian Miller, the personal brand, stands for. So it ties all my businesses and projects together.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, and it's important, right, to understand that we're dynamic beings. We're always evolving. We're either
Yeah.
on a state of growth or decay. There's no middle. We're
Mm-hmm.
never ever stagnant. We're never stagnant. You're either growing or you're dying. There's no middle ground. There's no
Yeah.
gray area there. I want to throw, I don't know if it's just opening a can of worms, but the concept of purpose, the idea of purpose, what's my life's purpose? What's, what's going to drive me
Mm.
forever to be, whatever I want to be and whatnot, that changes. I feel it's important, right, to have a good grasp of what we stand for. But I think
Mm-hmm.
sitting down and trying to put together this whole context of purpose, of life purpose in one sit down, it's practically impossible because we are changing. The purpose of that person, 10 years ago, maybe it was accomplished, but that person, that purpose evolved along with that individual, and now you have a new purpose. It's whatever,
And yeah, and this is why people who get successful are never satisfied, right?
yeah.
Because when I was 22, I was just dreaming of the day when I would be successful enough as a magician I wouldn't need roommates, and then I got successful enough that I wouldn't need roommates, but I wasn't happy, or at least I wasn't satisfied, right? I was happy, but I wasn't satisfied. I thought, okay, but now I want to be able to afford to go on take dates to nicer restaurants, whatever it was. And then I was dreaming of that 6-figure mark, because a lot of
Yeah.
young entrepreneurs are just dreaming of 6 figures, and then I hit that way earlier than I expected, and then I was dreaming. There's always a new thing. The ladder just keeps going. Like there's
Yeah,
no
exactly.
thing. Jeff Bezos isn't satisfied. He sent himself into space because he wanted to do more.
Yeah.
Like you can be the wealthiest person on earth and you want to do something else. And sometimes all that level of success makes people really unhappy too, because they're looking for the next thing. So I think you're right. I think the search for purpose can be a very silly one. Goals are great. Purpose, I don't believe, and I don't want to step on people's toes who are spiritual or anything, but I don't believe anyone actually has a born purpose. I think we get a chance to do something. We get to decide what we make of our situation. We don't get to choose the situation we're born into. Being born into poverty or born into wealth it affects our lives in a very, very significant way. The science, psychology, all the studies tell us that. But just like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the mountain, right? He pushes the boulder all the way up the mountain, and then when he gets to the top, it rolls back down, right? The myth of Sisyphus, the Greek myth, it rolls back down, and he has to walk back down and push it up over and over and over again for eternity. Well, even Sisyphus is free. He's free because in his walk back down the mountain, he gets to decide how he feels about the work of pushing the boulder up the mountain. This is what Albert Camus said, to go back to my philosophy roots, he said Sisyphus is the absurd hero. He's came smack in the face with the absurdity of existence. There's no point to any of this. It's repetitive nonsense I got to keep doing.
He knows it's a loop. Yeah.
He knows it's a loop, but he's free in his ability to decide how he feels about his work. So there's always something that we can choose, even if there isn't any such thing as true freedom out there because of external circumstances.
Right. Right. I love it, man. Man, I think we can go on for hours on this, this type of conversation. At the end of the day, though, I think the core or principle out there is really the connection, right? There's got to be and especially now with all the virtual stuff happening, I think there's going to be a lot of desensitization going on as far as connecting and genuinely connecting with people, being authentic with people, and that sort of thing. So I don't know where that's headed. I'm not a big big proponent. I love technology and advances and all that stuff, but there's nothing as good as good old handshake and conversation and heart to heart. in my opinion. So it's always important to have that human connection in place, right? One, because it builds us as individuals. It makes us more caring, more loving, more considerate about everybody around us. And then two, because it's the right thing to do, right? We're all in this together somehow, some way, and taking up space in this big rock. So why live isolated? Why live isolated when there's stuff that we can actually come in and do to improve our level of human connection? So love it. Yeah. Thank you so much, man. I know the conversation. I mean, we touch on a lot of different topics real quick, and I love that. I do want to make I'm going to drop the link to the Tech Talk again on the show notes, so audience can come in and listen to it. There's one question that I like to ask before we start signing off, and that's, if you were walking down the street and you ran into your 17-year-old self, what would you tell that kid?
It's going to be worth it.
Love it.
That's literally the only thing I would say, because I worry that if I said anything more than that in the hard times, when it was really, really difficult, when I was sobbing on the floor of my apartment just in tears because I didn't have enough gigs as a magician and I didn't know if I was going to be able to pay my rent the next month, and if I was going to have to hang it up and be a failure and hang my head in shame and go home. In those moments, what I learned, finding the strength in those moments to get through them, the creativity that comes out of those moments, if I told myself anything to help me get through them in advance, I don't think I would have learned the lessons that I needed to learn to get to where I am. And where I am is the most enjoyable phase of my career I've ever been. I'm more passionate about the work I'm doing now than I've ever been. I have an amazing wife. I have a kid. I got a 15-month-old, 16-month-old this week, actually. I have a sustainable career that I can do without leaving the house too much. I don't have to be on the road. I don't have to miss anything anymore. And I wouldn't give this up for the world. And so I wouldn't want to screw that over by telling my 17-year-old self something that would make him less likely to work as hard as I had to work.
I love it. I love it, man. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you and I don't know, maybe ask you about coaching for getting ready to speak or find a TED Talk conversation, stuff like that, what is the best place or where is the best place to find you at?
Yeah, conquerthereddot.com. That's the name of my coaching program for TED speakers and people who want to do stuff like TED. Conquerthereddot.com is where you'll find all the information.
Beautiful. What about social media? Are you active on social media?
I am very active on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just look up Brian Miller. If you search Brian Miller Magic, you will find me very easily because there was about 1 billion Brian Millers in the world. So I had to do something interesting with my life. I had to stand out somehow. There were 3 of me in my own high school while I was in high school. So if you search Brian Miller Magic on LinkedIn, you'll find me real easy. And that's my most active professional presence.
Amazing. Well, there you guys have it. So definitely check that out. Take a look at that video on or the TED Talk conversation, because it really hones in on the idea of perspective, right? And I think, there was a really cool surprise at the end of that story, which I enjoyed quite a bit. So I'm going to leave that as a gambit for people to go out there and then check it out. So thank you so much, man.
Thank you for not spoiling that too, because I've had podcast guests that ask me about the ending, and then I just think, no, you have to actually watch it, because there's a story that unfolds like a magic trick.
100%. It came to the end of it. I was like, wow, that is brilliant. It's so amazing.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me, man. This was awesome. I had a blast.
My pleasure. Fam, there you guys have it. Brian Miller. Make sure you follow him and reach out to him if you have any questions. In the meantime, stay focused. You got this. Let's go.